50 years ago, the United States Congress established the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And at the time, the idea was to ensure that America would have a stable supply of energy in the event of a natural disaster, or more likely, in the case of a war in the Middle East. The reserve was like a fire extinguisher in a building that read break glass in case of emergency. It was a last resort to be used only if somehow the U.S. could neither generate its own energy nor find oil for reasonable prices overseas. When the Biden administration took control of the federal government a few years ago, all of that changed. And for one thing, the Biden administration shut down existing drilling sites and prevented new oil leases from being signed. And then, to add insult to injury, Joe Biden's handlers used the strategic reserve to temporarily lower the price of gas in the weeks before the midterm elections. Nothing like that had ever happened in the history of this country. It was a really big deal that not a lot of people paid attention to. But the Biden administration insisted that this was necessary because war had broken out in Ukraine. And as a result, we needed to ban Russian oil imports. They told us again and again that this was a once-in-a-lifetime situation. They said it was precisely the kind of emergency that justified the use of the strategic reserve. Well, less than 2 years later, it's clear to everyone that the Biden administration was either lying or totally incompetent, or probably both. That's because, once again, we're confronted with yet another war that no one saw coming, supposedly. This time, it's a war in the Middle East, exactly the kind of conflict that Congress established the strategic reserve to deal with in the first place. So what's the plan? What do we do now that we've tapped our emergency oil reserves to the point that they're at the lowest level in 4 decades? Probably won't surprise you to hear that nobody in the Biden administration has an answer to that question. No one on the right does either, actually. Instead, both political parties are now calling for U.S. military intervention in the Middle East that would deplete our oil supply even further. When I say military intervention, I mean that Republicans are calling for all-out war with a nuclear power. So here's Lindsey Graham the other day explaining that we need to start bombing Iran's oil refineries. Watch.
Well, for every Israeli or American hostage executed by Hamas, we should take down an Iranian oil refinery. The only way you're going to keep this war from escalating is to hold Iran accountable. How much more death and destruction do we have to take from the Iranian regime? I am confident this was planned and funded by the Iranians. Hamas is a bunch of animals who deserve to be treated like animals. So if I was Israel, I would go in on the ground. There is no truce to be had here. I would dismantle Hamas. This is the best opportunity Israel has to destroy Hamas. Take it to the Iranians. If you harm one American in Syria by using your Iranian militia against us in Syria, if you escalate the war by urging Hezbollah to attack Israel in the north, if Hamas kills one American or Israeli hostage, we're going to blow up your oil refineries and put you out of business. It is now time to take the war to the Ayatollah's backyard.
Yes, let's keep this from escalating by bombing Iran's oil refineries. That's how you de-escalate a situation. Now, what would happen if the Pentagon did exactly what Lindsey Graham said and started bombing Iran? Would the price of oil instantly increase by 500%? Would Iran retaliate using the nuclear weapons that they probably have by now? Who knows? What we do know is that the end result for America would almost certainly be bad. I mean, it's hard to imagine any scenario where any average American's life is improved by blowing up Iran's oil refineries. But Lindsey Graham doesn't care. He doesn't care about Americans at all. That's the truth. He's an unhinged, reckless neocon who should have been run out of political office years ago. Yet, like so many other neocons in both the Republican and Democrat parties, he remains in place, constantly hatching new schemes to make, to hurt this country and its people. Schemes that, by the way, aren't going to affect him at all. So here's the point where it becomes necessary to take 10 steps back and assess the situation from a distance. Pretend you're, say, the leader of the Communist Party of China, and you've been looking for an opportunity to expand your borders for a very long time with a particular eye towards Hong Kong and Taiwan. And then you see this. The government of the United States, supposedly the world's preeminent superpower, is shutting down its own domestic energy production at the same time it's destroying its own domestic supply of petroleum. Put 2 and 2 together, and the message from the Biden administration is pretty clear. That message is this: our leaders have no idea what they're doing. And as if to emphasize that point, The Biden administration has stumbled over itself repeatedly since the invasion of Israel began over the weekend. The State Department sent not one, but two tweets out telling Israel to sign a ceasefire without retaliating in any way for the attack on their homeland. And one of those tweets was from Tony Blinken's account, and both of those tweets were deleted within 24 hours, which really inspires confidence, Then on Monday, to add insult to injury, Joe Biden's account tweeted something about how he's going to ban junk fees charged by airlines and concert venues. That's what he's thinking about right now. He's thinking about junk fees. Now, this is the laziest possible form of voter engagement, and it's one that Joe Biden's handlers keep coming back to. Vote for us and Ticketmaster will be more upfront with its fees. What an inspiring platform. And by the way, since we're on the subject briefly, we all pay a significant amount of junk fees every day, courtesy of the IRS. So Biden wants airlines to stop bilking us of every last cent. And by the way, I want them to stop that too. Except that the government, his own government, is doing the same thing and to a much greater extent. So perhaps you should take the plank out of the government's own eye before worrying about the speck in Ticketmaster. Now, again, our adversaries in China and elsewhere, they can see all this. They can see a nation that's completely unprepared for a massive international crisis, up to and including the outbreak of World War III, potentially. The signs are everywhere. There's really no way that anyone can deny it at this point. We are an unserious nation led by the most unserious people imaginable. One of those unserious people happens to lead the Department of Interior, and here she was just days before the Hamas terrorists invaded Israel. Here's what she was thinking about. Watch.
Patty, I am so excited to be here with you at Stonewall National Monument with these beautiful flags behind us. Tell me, in your own words, why places like this, like Stonewall, are so important to telling America's story.
It's a great question. I think it's because queer rights are more under attack than ever. And I think if we don't acknowledge the past, we're bound to repeat it. So, at a place like Stonewall, this beautiful place, it's a place where so much discrimination and hatred occurred against the queer community, but it's also a place where resistance and queer joy and queer liberation happened.
So that is the Secretary of the Department of the Interior of the United States. She oversees all federal lands and natural resources in this country, including regulations concerning oil and gas leasing. But that's what she's doing right now. She can't be bothered with the prospect of war in the Middle East. Now, to be fair, the Department of Interior is not alone in that respect. Plenty of other U.S. government agencies and departments have been wasting their time with frivolous virtue signaling. They don't care about keeping you safe or preparing for World War III, or better yet, working to actually avoid World War III, which would really be the best. That would be what I would prefer. Instead, they're fixated on diversity and equity and inclusion. Just a few days ago, the Wall Street Journal, and this is some great timing on this, they ran a truly extraordinary piece explaining how the U.S. military is overrun with so-called skinny fat recruits. According to the piece, quote, one problem the Army faces these days is a high number of skinny fat recruits. These people don't look out of shape, but indeed are because of sedentary lifestyles that have left them with low muscle mass and frail bones and connective tissue. At Fort Moore in Georgia, new soldiers are given calcium supplements to counter a recent uptick in broken feet and bones in the legs, according to several senior soldiers in charge of training. Well, nothing wrong with that, nothing to worry about. We just have Army recruits that need calcium supplements so that their bones don't fracture when they're going for a jog or something. This is the state of the U.S. military, and the reason why we're in this state is, well, there's a lot of reasons for it. One of them is that we're looking at the situation after years of purges in which so-called vaccine skeptics were removed from the service. And you've got a bunch of overweight slobs who are, quote, skinny fat, and these are the people standing between you and a potential foreign invasion force. I mean, how many skinny fat soldiers do you think they have in, the Chinese army exactly? Does anybody with a brain think the number is higher than 0? Now, if we lived in a serious country, we'd expel all these skinny fat troops from our military. We'd insist on some standards, and we'd do it fast. And we would also be recruiting people because we're looking for, tough men who want to kill the enemy and protect the country. Like, that's the kind of recruiting we'd be doing. Instead, for a very long time, the recruitment, they've been putting out, as we've played on the show, they've been putting out recruitment ads that look like Disney movies. going out of their way to recruit women and, non-binary and transgenders. Because we don't live in a serious country. So instead, our government is preoccupied with this sort of thing. And with other things too, like social media feuds, for example. The other day, the White House went after the very popular account Libs of TikTok. Why is that? Well, because Libs of TikTok did what Libs of TikTok always does. She revealed what leftists, particularly leftists in power, are doing. She didn't distort anything. She didn't lie. She just held up a mirror. And in this particular case, Libs of TikTok held a mirror up to Tyler Cherry. He's a communications official at the Department of Interior, which is the same agency that interviewed the fetishist at Stonewall, which we just showed you. So a lot of interesting things happening over at the Department of Interior. But Libs of TikTok posted Tyler Cherry's photo along with his many deranged social media posts in which he rants about Russiagate and compares police officers to slave patrols. So here's what he looks like, and here's the picture. Now, of course, it's usually not polite to mock somebody's physical appearance, but at some point, you're allowed to look at somebody and form some common sense conclusions. You can tell what corrupt ideology they subscribe to just by looking at them. This is certainly one of those cases. The fact that this person moonlights as an activist on social media is just more evidence that we're led by deeply unserious people. Now, you may recall that a bunch of us right-wing bigots, we jumped to very similar conclusions about the energy official Sam Brinton last year. And when we did, we were condemned as homophobes. And in that case, all we did was look at the guy and how he dressed, and we said, something's not right here. I don't think this person should be working in government. And we were told, open your mind, be tolerant. A few months later, Brinton was fired and under arrest for stealing women's luggage from the airport. So you can indeed judge a book by its cover, it turns out. Now, admittedly, if you're approaching this from a distance, all of this might seem like a social media drama. It might seem inconsequential, but it's not. This is what your government is spending its time doing as a second major war erupts under their watch in just 2 years. They're worried about Libs of TikTok. They're concerned with backing up their fetishist in the Department of the Interior. What this means is that if World War III does break out at some point in the near future, God forbid, which unfortunately seems increasingly likely considering that we are led by a parade of morally corrupt circus clowns, well, if that happens, then we are unprepared, to put it mildly. We aren't simply incapable of handling the next global crisis, whether it's an invasion of Taiwan or something even worse. Our leaders can't even run their own Twitter accounts in a responsible and coherent fashion. And this is not just embarrassing. The problem is that for the enemies of this country, it's an opportunity. And let's pray they don't take advantage of it. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.